This lesson is a review on the quadratic formula that you learned in Algebra 1. In Algebra 1, we started working with what was called quadratic equations. Those are the ones that have an x squared in them. Finding solutions to quadratic equations has to do with finding the values of x in which the graph crosses the x-axis. You can do this by graphing a function, by factoring, or by using the quadratic formula. Today we're going to work with the formula. All quadratic equations come in the form ax squared, where a is a coefficient, bx, where b is a coefficient, plus c, equals 0. The key is that it has to be equal to 0. A, b, and c are simply the coefficients next to those variables. Although this formula is longer than using factoring or graphing, it will always work. Sometimes factoring doesn't always work. The quadratic formula will always work. The formula looks like, in order to find the x, you take the opposite of your b value. That means the opposite of whatever value is next to the x. Then you put plus or minus, and then you put a square root sign. Inside the square root sign, you put b squared, so your b value squared, minus 4, the 4 will always be there, times your a value, which is the number next to your x squared, times the c value, which is your plane number. And then you divide that all by the value of 2 times the value of a. So let's start with a simple problem. The first thing that you have to do is identify what your a, b, and c values are in each of your equations. Make sure that it is set equal to 0 before you pull out what your a, b, and c values are. In this problem, I am set equal to 0, so I can simply look. My a value would be a 1. My b value would be a 4. And my c value would be a negative 5. Those are the values that I'm going to stick into the quadratic formula. I'll take the opposite of my b value, so I will take negative 4 plus or minus square root. B squared, 4 squared is 16, minus 4, that will always be there, times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 5. And then I'm going to divide that entire thing by 2 times my a value. 2 times 1 is 2. I can use my calculator to simplify this. I can put the entire thing in my calculator by simply hitting the square root button and then putting parentheses around the pieces that I need to. Usually when you hit the square root button on your calculator, one set of parentheses will already appear automatically. So I put in the square root, and then I push 16 minus 4 times, and I can put in times 1 if I want to, but we all know times 1 doesn't do anything, times negative 5. Then make sure that I end my parenthesis so that my computer knows that I'm going to take the square root of this entire thing. I hit enter, and in this particular case, it would be 16, and then this would end up being a positive 20, so 16 plus 20 is 36, and the square root of 36 is 6. So my problem becomes negative 4 plus or minus 6 all over 2. I'm not done with my problem yet. I can simplify this. Once I get out from under the square root, or simplify the square root as far as I can, now's when I'm going to split it up into my 2 possible answers. When you factor, you get 2 answers. When you do the quadratic, you also get 2 answers. I will split them up into negative 4 plus 6 over 2. And then the other one will be when I use the subtraction sign. So it would be negative 4 minus 6 over 2. That's how I get my 2 answers. Negative 4 plus 6 is positive 2. Divided by 2 is 1. Negative 4 minus 6 is negative 10. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. So my two possible answers for this problem would be positive 1 and negative 5. Okay, let's try it with this one. This one's set equal to 0. Pull out your A value, your B value, and your C value first. Negative 3 is my A value, negative 5 is my B value, and C is 1. Plug it into the formula. The opposite of my B value would be positive 5, plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared. Anytime you square a negative number, it turns positive. So that would be 25 minus 4, because that's always there, times negative 3 times 1. And then I'm going to divide that entire thing by 2 times my A value. 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. I do this entire thing in my calculator. 25 plus 12 would be 37. So my answers are going to be 5 plus or minus the square root of 37 all over negative 10. The square root of 37 is going to be 6.08. So I would do 5 plus 6.08 divided by negative 10, and 5 minus 6.08 divided by negative 10. So I simplified those answers. 11.08 divided by negative 10 is negative 1.1, simplified. And the other one, when I take 5 minus 6.08 and then divide that by negative 10, I get 0.108. Those are my two answers to the problem. My last one. Notice this one is not set equal to 0, so the first thing I have to do is subtract my 50 over, so it becomes x squared plus 5x minus 50 equals 0. So my A value is 1, my B value is 5, and my C value would be negative 50. Plugging that into the formula, I would take the opposite of my B value, so it would be negative 5 plus or minus big square root. B squared is 25 minus 4, which is always there, times 1 times negative 50. That's going to give me the square root of 225, which is 15. Remember to put that all over 2 times 1, which is 2. So I get negative 5 plus or minus 15. When I take the square root of that, I get 15 divided by 2. This is where I split up my answers. Kids, try and split them up before that. Do not try and split up the answers until you deal with that square root sign one way or another. So I get negative 5 plus 15 divided by 2, and negative 5 minus 15 divided by 2. So this would be 10 divided by 2 is 5, and this would be negative 20 divided by 2 would be negative 10. So my two answers would be 5 and negative 10. Homework for this assignment is on page 372, 1 through 9, and the quasi-quadratic worksheet.